Welcome to the Mind Rise podcast, the catalyst that takes you from who you are right now to all that you can become. Hey guys, so I'm excited for this episode of the Mind Rise podcast. It is one I'm making an impromptu episode, and this is going to be a solo episode. I want to share a bit more about my path to reinvention. If you haven't already checked out the latest episode with Craig Honeycutt on reinvention, definitely do not pass go, do not collect $200, go straight to giving that a listen. I'll give you more context for today's episode. And you can check out the podcast on Spotify. We are on YouTube, on Apple, and then obviously at the website as well. So Craig's talking about reinvention. I'm not going to regurgitate that for you, but I do want to share a little bit about my path to reinvention. I strongly believe that reinvention is not failure by any stretch of the imagination. I believe that reinvention is the next iteration of you, almost like as a snake sheds its skin, right? We shed so that we can grow, and that we should always be growing. We should always be evolving. Anytime that you feel stuck, anytime that you feel like you've walked as far as you can and you kind of hit a dead end or a cul-de-sac, it's typically a really good indication that you are ready to up level, you're ready to grow, you're ready to reinvent yourself. And I've had many of these throughout my lifetime. And whether it's because I can see them on my LinkedIn, right, or just knowing from my own personal timeline, which interestingly enough, that is one of the things that we do in the coach training program, is having people go through their own timeline, because we see when we go back in time and we look at the course of our life so far, more often than not, we do see these times when there was a spike, when there was a time of growth. Sometimes that time of growth comes from things not working out, and sometimes that time of growth comes because it's just time to evolve. It's just time to grow. Right? Things don't have to be bad in order for you to want them to be different. So I think that it's important that we look at our own timeline, and also knowing that in this moment of time, as I record this podcast, that there's a different iteration of me happening right as we speak. I know it, whether I can see it and I'm doing things toward it each and every day, or it's just like a seed that's planted that we're watering it, and it's like, oh gosh, I'm watering dirt. And then one day we see the sprout, and one day we see the plant, and one day we see it just grow larger and larger and larger and producing fruit. So I strongly believe that we are always in this process. It's a cyclical experience of our lives. Joseph Campbell talks about that in his Hero of a Thousand Faces. I think that's the name of his book. But essentially the concept is the hero's journey, right? We're always in this cyclical experience of life. And for one of my experiences, which is what I'm going to focus on sharing with you for the podcast today, that this happened before I started MindRise. So I'm taking you way back in the time machine to when I was a school social worker. So we're going back like a 2005, 6, 7, right around that time. I was a school social worker, and I applied for this job, and I allegedly beat out 200 applicants for this one position, right? And here I am right out of my master's degree. And this is the kind of job that you do for 25 years. You do for 25 years, you retire, you get a gold watch, you get your pension, your benefits. So it's like you set your longitude and latitude to being right here for the next 25 years. And it was great. I loved it. When I first started it, I was doing that, and I had my private practice as a psychotherapist on the side. Like, that was, for me, that was the best iteration of what I had been working so hard toward, both academically as well as professionally. And I had arrived, and it was great. And it wasn't that it was ever not great, which prompted me to make a change. It was just, I'm doing this job. I'm 6 years in, I'm 7 years in, I'm 8 years in, and I get this little whisper that there's something else for me. Now, this is interesting. If this has ever happened to you before, you get this little whisper, or this like little knowing that things are about to change, or that like this is good, but there might be something else for you. And a lot of times we deny that call. We just are like, no, actually look around. Like, this is what I worked so hard for. So I'm going to stay right here, right? Change me to my desk. And things weren't bad. It wasn't as if I had this horrible boss and I needed a change. It wasn't as if there was a big overhaul or layoffs or anything. No, nothing actually needed to change. I was really good at my job, right? I'm happy, relatively good at what I did on a day-to-day basis. I get feedback from other people that I'm doing well, the reports, doing well, doing well, doing well. But then there's this knowing that there is something more for you. And what do you do with that, right? So the number one thing that I always recommend to everybody is make some space and get some think time. This is crucial. More often than not, we just get into the motion of our life and we end up on a hamster wheel of sorts where we're just doing what we're doing day after day and we're doing what's expected of us or we expect of ourselves on a day-to-day basis. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you get into this well grooved path, right, this well oiled machine, which again, great thing. A lot of times we don't make time for think time. We don't clear the decks because we're just in motion. So that's the first thing. I started to have this inclination that there was something else for me. But I'd be damned if I could put my finger on it. I had absolutely no idea. And therefore, having no idea, it's an easy thing to just say, well, I'm not going to do anything about it. That's silly. Like, look around. Everything is fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And I knew that I needed to take a break and I needed to have some think time to think over what it is that I wanted to do, right? Okay, if it's not this, then what could it be? Now, for most of us, we are intelligent enough that we've got lots of options, and sometimes we forget we have options. You can do just about anything. And while I'm talking about resources through the course of this podcast, Poe Bronson wrote a book that I had read, I want to say one of the summers, maybe between my junior and senior year of college. And it was called What Should I Do with My Life? I'll make sure that I link it in the show notes. And I loved this book because it gave each chapter was a different vignette of someone and their life experience. And I particularly remember this one guy who was an attorney and he's billing a ton of hours, ton of hours, ton of hours, and he's hardly seeing his kid. And what he wants so badly is like a window office. He wants a good view and he's busting his butt. And then he has an epiphany. Now, sometimes we wait for the diagnosis. Sometimes we wait for the tragedy. Sometimes we wait for the wake up call. You don't have to wait for something tragic in order to have an epiphany. You can just start listening to your inner knowing and like just see, okay? You like we don't have to totally overhaul your life, but just see what else is possible. So anyway, long story short, and I'll spoil this one chapter of the book for you, is that he ends up saying, I don't want to miss out on my kid's life. I am tired of not having this beautiful view. I'm tired of not being in control of my time. And he became a long haul truck driver, right? He went from being this attorney to a long haul truck driver, takes his kid with him on certain trips, and he's got the best view in the world, according to him, from his windshield there. And it's just one story of many that sometimes we forget that we have options. So, step one to reinvention for me, in my experience, was creating think time to imagine what else is possible, right? You could shuffle the deck of what else is possible and come up with, nope, I'm actually going to stay exactly where I am in relationships, in your work, in your health, in your habits, in your choices, in your location. That's fine. But it does pay to give yourself the time to actually put the cards on the table of what is an option for you. All right, so step two is just what's the next right step? And I'm using right with my air quotes here. It's just the next decision. You just have to make another decision. So once we have our think time and we put what our options are on the table, then ask yourself, what would be my next right step? So for me, going back to my story here, is that I knew that, okay, if I want to start my own business, I'm going to need a website, right? This was 2013. So yeah, 2013, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to need a website. I'm going to need to be able to find a vehicle with which to put myself out there. So I got a website designer. And then from there, I was learning what are the pieces that have to go into this website. And that's what it is. When I talk about the next right step, the next step, it is about following those breadcrumbs, right? As you follow the breadcrumbs, you've got to check in and listen, like what feels good for you, not what you should be doing all the time. We can take a look at what other people are doing and see, do we want to model that? It goes back to playing Goldilocks a little bit, right? Figuring out what's too hot, too cold, just right. You see what other people are doing. It was, I like that. Oh, no, I don't like that. Oh, that, yeah, that feels really aligned. Oh, nope, not that one. Right? Checking in with ourselves continuously so that we do know what's our yes and what's our no. What's just our next step. And once we get a cadence of taking that next step when it comes to reinvention, we just take another step and another step. So that's part three here, right? As we want to reinvent ourselves, first, we need think time. Second, we need that next step. And the third is to do it. Now, when you think about doing it, when it comes to reinvention, and it's scary, it's absolutely scary. It should be scary because this is something that is new. And my daughter and I talk about this concept of being skited, which is scared and excited at the same time. So if you know that you're feeling like a push pull, a yes, no, a foot on the brake and a foot on the gas, that's a lot of times an indication that it is a yes for you. It's a cautious yes. And that's okay, right? Because when it comes to just doing it, just going for it, saying yes, that I like to think of us doing it one of two ways. For some of us, we take a flying leap off the end of the diving board, like, whoo, Geronimo, here I go, and I'm doing it, right? No holds barred. And then for others of us, which I think is important to know, that you end up with the same result. For others, we need to walk in through the shallow end and we just kind of need to wade in and see how we're doing and seeing how we're feeling and, you know, just taking it slow. But guess what? The end result is the same. Whether you jump off the diving board or you wade in from the shallow end, the end result is still swimming. There's not one pattern that's better than another, right? Kathy Colby talks about this in her concept of conation, right? And conation is a word in the dictionary and it essentially means how we do what we do. For me, I tend to be a person who is high quick start. So I get an idea and I'm like, okay, I want to go for it. I'll do a little bit of research. And then I do have a little bit of Geronimo in me where I'm just like, all right, here we go. And I trust that I'll figure it out. That doesn't mean that it's better or worse than somebody who needs to do a lot of research and thinking about it and mapping it out and putting it on a calendar and wading in through the shallow end, right? It's also about being attuned to your nervous system, right? For some of us, all of that preparation, all that pre-work, that planning, is helpful to regulate our nervous system when we're about to do something new, right? Like to reinvent yourself, to put yourself out there, to try and figure it out. And therefore, the best way to meet yourself is all the preparation on the back end, where you're going to, from the very beginning, behind the scenes, you are going to get yourself ready to make your big move. And I think that that's an important point. When you want to do something, what is it that I need in order to do my big move, in order to reinvent? So, using the pool analogy, whether you want to wade in from the shallow end or you want to go right off the diving board, maybe what you need is swimmies, right? A pool noodle. That's okay, right? I often think about this in another analogy that I frequently use about bumpers in the bowling alley, right? When we want to learn how to bowl, bumpers don't ensure that we get strikes every single time and then we're going to get a perfect score. No, bumpers in the bowling alley is just helpful so that we get less gutter balls. And that's what the whole point of number three is. When you want to go and do it, what is it that you need in order to support, fortify yourself, get yourself ready? Is it information? Is it research? Is it a posse? Is it having a plus one in your corner, right? Like this is also one of the reasons why coaching is a good thing, guys. If you're thinking about reinvention, definitely get a plus one in your corner. But what is it that you need? Do you need to be journaling regularly? Like I've got clients that when they start a really good like workout regimen for themselves, their mental health is stellar and they're crushing it in whatever endeavors they're doing, whether it's a project at home or a project at work. Why? Because they find that when they have regimen, that when they have routine, that they're getting the best version of themselves out there. So what is it that you need that would be your bumpers in the bowling alley? Again, it's not going to ensure that you get all strikes, A pluses, gold stars every single time. But what it is going to do is make sure that you get less gutter balls. Okay. Last point that I want to make of the podcast today is evaluation, right? a lot of times we think that once we had the chutzpah, as my grandmother would say, once we had the chutzpah to do the da-da-da-da big thing, right, whether we're doing with our swimmies on or we're just, going for it, that we're done. You're not done. You're absolutely not done in this process of reinvention. Reevaluation, evaluation in and of itself is so crucial. And the reason that it's crucial is because we need to create a feedback loop with ourselves to say that worked, that didn't work, that felt good, that didn't feel good, right? It's in our brain, our neurofeedback loops that help us to develop a narrative about ourselves, our sense of self, our confidence, our identity, right? All of that comes from creating a feedback loop. And evaluation helps us to do that. Now, you get to decide. Do you want to evaluate in a very formal capacity where you have a rubric by which did this happen? Did that happen? Did this happen? So let's just hypothetically say that you're reinventing yourself when it came to work. Did I make more money? So I remember when I started the company, that was really my very, very first goal. Could I match my salary from the school? And that was how I was going to decide whether or not this was a success. That's what it came down to. And that was a bold goal. It was a really bold goal for me to go out my very first year in business and think that I would be able to match a salary that from my established career. And in many ways, for me, it was a major motivator. And times that I would be nervous to put myself out there, I'd just do it and I'd go for it because I knew in the back of my mind that one of my metrics of my evaluation report card was, could I match my salary? Right. And then year one, that was what I wanted to do. And spoiler alert, it happened. Yay. Um, so what is on your report card? What is on your measurement? It might actually be that I get more time back for myself. Right. It might be that actually I have location flexibility. That was a huge one for me. Right. When I looked at my report card for myself as I'm evaluating, did this reinvention, how to go? Like, how is it going? Right. We're always in process. And location independence, that was a big one on there. Being in charge of my own time. Yeah, that was on there. And the financial aspect. So when those boxes were checked for me, I interpreted that as this is working. Now, sometimes the boxes get checked and that's the interpretation. And other times when we evaluate, we notice that actually I had these three things on my list, but that these two other things have presented themselves as important to me. And that's okay. So that's what the process of evaluation is all about. It's not about you make a big decision and then you're working toward it and da-da-da-da, it's done. It's not done. You need to circle back around to fortify, to connect with yourself, to like create the narrative, to see, right? There were other values that hopped themselves on to this list over time. So after year one of going for it and starting the business, right? Because there was a lot that I just didn't know. It almost felt very much like, when the little kids learn how to ski and they have no poles and they're just bombing the mountain. It's almost like they don't know pain. That was what year one of starting a business, I can look back and see that that was exactly it. I didn't know what I didn't know about starting a business. I didn't know the things to be afraid of or look out for. I just had no knowledge. So I was just bombing the mountains and going for it. And that made sense for year one, for year two. But over time, there were things that got added to that report card of sorts for me, the metrics by which I was measuring, is this working? Does this feel good? Over time, it was adding more programs. Over time, it was then adding, ways to reach out. I added writing books. I added the podcast. I added having a team. I added having the coach training program. There were things that I added over time that let me know, oh, this is the next iteration of what I'm meant to be doing. Right? So reinvention is not a one and done and good job, gold star, see you later, reinvented, on to the next. This is a process of coming back, coming back, coming back to yourself, not backwards, but just return. Like you're going to go out and you're going to do all the things. And you're also going to come back here and check in. Is this working? Because your metrics should be changing. What used to be a metric for me, which was what inspired me to get the job where I got a paycheck on the 15th and the 30th, and I had the security of knowing, okay, I will work 25 years and then I will retire with a pension and benefits. That security at that time was a major motivator for me. And then over time, I found that security didn't rank as high on my metrics, that actually freedom ranked higher. Being able to have my own time meant more. Being able to check in with myself, being able to make the money I wanted to make, work the way I wanted to work, put programs out there, like all those things became the most important to me. And that's the process of reinvention over time. And then you do it again. So I can't wait to hear what the next iteration of you is. In fact, when I posted about Craig's episode on Instagram, I got a bunch of people coming into my DMs of like, oh my God, I've reinvented myself. Oh my God, this is exactly where I am and I'm feeling paralyzed. Right? We all have our stuff that comes up. We all have a story. And it's about what you think about your story, how you feel about your story, and what you do about your story, right? Our words internally in our brain create our feelings, create our actions every single time. This is how we're wired as humans. So stay tuned as I continue to reinvent myself over and over again, because that's what it is. It's about finding what's the most true version of you. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me for today's short little episode about how I have walked through reinvention. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to shoot me a DM or an email. I'll make sure that I link those books in our show notes, and have a great day. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the MindRise podcast. Check out our show notes for details and to get in on the latest at MindRise. Visit us on Instagram at the MindRise